welcome to MountPodcast, the podcast of everything Mount Prospect, where we get to talk to some of the movers and shakers in the 56. That kind of proves why friendliness is a way of life in Mount Prospect. Today we have Emily Datillo, the museum director for the Mount Prospect Historical Society. Welcome, Emily.
Hello, it's good to be here.
Great. So tell me a little bit. You're a lifelong Mount Prospect resident, right?
Yes, I am.
So tell me about growing up in Mount Prospect a little bit. Where'd you go to school?
Right. Well, I went to school at St. Raymond's, so I'm a St. Raymond's alum. And then for high school, I went to Prospect High School. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed growing up here. It was a good childhood for sure.
Okay.
Some good memories.
Yes. So where did you? So you grew up in Mount Prospect. Where did you go to college?
So I went to Loyola University Chicago for my bachelor's degree, and that was in history and anthropology. And then I wanted more school, so I went to Marquette University for my master's in United States history.
Okay, which the history is right up your alley.
Yeah,
so you.
History.
So what did you think you were gonna do, or what did you start doing with your history degree?
Oh well, while I was at Loyola in college, I wanted to do something with history. I know there's a lot of different paths you can take with a history major, but for me, I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. I don't really have that patience. But other than that, I'm like, I still want to do history. So I volunteered at a museum, and then what really solidified it is during my junior year at Loyola, I studied at Loyola's Rome Center. And one of the classes I took there was an Intro to Museum Studies class. So in my head, I was like, all right, this is going to make or break it. I enjoyed volunteering, but if I don't like the class, then we're going to see what else is out there. But I love the class. And of course, Rome is full of so much history. So how could I not love it?
Right.
So that really set me on the path of, all right, I'm going to do this. So ever since then, I was like, I'm going to work in a museum, and now I am. So it's exciting.
Okay. Is this the first museum you've worked in?
No. I've been working, interning, and volunteering at museums for, really since I was a junior in college. So it's been a while. Immediately before this job, I worked as a museum educator at Napier Settlement.
Okay. All the way out in Naperville. Yes. So what kinds of similarities were there to Napier Settlement to what you're doing here?
Well, really, it's only one element of what I do in Mount Prospect. So in terms of like educational programming, so here in this case, like the field trips to Central School, one of the buildings I interpreted at Napier Settlement was a one-room schoolhouse.
Okay.
So in a way, it was like, all right, I know this. I know Central School. And even just being able to do public presentations, talking to people about history in ways that is, I think, interesting, because history has a reputation for being a notoriously boring subject sometimes. So that challenge is making sure you can still get it across to people in a clear and interesting way.
Okay. Well, Mount Prospect's only been around a little over 100 years officially. I mean, as a village. But there's still a lot of history here, isn't there?
Oh, yes. It's everywhere you look. Sometimes you have to look a little harder or change your perception of what is history, but it's there.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about kind of one of the jewels of the Mount Prospect Historical Museum, the Central Schoolhouse.
Yes.
Now, that has had quite a journey. It started out on Central Avenue, and now it's over at the museum campus. Can you talk a little bit about the journey it's taken and how it's gotten back here?
Oh, yes. Central School, I would argue it's the pride and joy of the Historical Society. The fact that it is on the Historical Society campus is the result of like 15, 20 years of hard work and community effort. But way back in the beginning, so it was originally built in 1896. William Willey was the carpenter responsible for building it, and then William Bussey is the one who donated the land it was on, which originally it was the intersection of Central and Main. So now that's where the library is today. So it served the community very well for as long as it could, but the community started growing in the 1920s. That was Mount Prospect's really first population boom. So they need a new school. So right next door, they built the second central school, which had more than one room. That was very exciting. And it was made of brick, so a bit more sturdy. But right after that, a couple of years later, was the Great Depression. So Central School just kind of stayed there. And as the town kept growing, I've read it was used in some cases as like overflow classroom space. But then in the 30s, St. John Episcopal Church purchased the Central School building and moved it to their church campus further along on Main Street. And that was theirs. That was their sanctuary until they were able to build a separate church, and that later got converted to church offices. So already that is one move for the schoolhouse. Right. But then in the early 2000s, St. John's wanted to expand their campus. But the community was like, wait a second, this is a historic building. A lot of organizations were founded within its walls. For that matter, the village was incorporated in that building. So beyond being Mount Prospect's first public school, it's very historic. So the Historical Society was able to purchase the building for $1, but there was a catch. The Historical Society had to pay to move it. So that launched really like round one of the fundraising campaign. And in 2008, the Historical Society was able to move it. And some of the photos are really pretty amazing.
I was there. I videotaped it as it came up Main Street and came around over onto Bussy and over. Yeah.
Oh, see, I was in Prospect. I was in class, so I couldn't go. But I get like the pictures are amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. The most expensive part was taking down the power lines across Central Avenue.
Yes, I've seen pictures of that where they pretty much had to maneuver things and shut some things down to just get it there.
Yeah, they had to pay ComEd to come out and lower those, and they built a box over the cables, and they pulled the whole school over the cables. So yeah, it was pretty. That's where most of the money went for that
community effort. You know, we needed everyone's cooperation to get that job done.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work for everyone.
So now that it's on the campus, what are you doing with it?
Well, one of the things I bet most residents know us as, we do field trips. So especially District 57 schools, their second graders come out, but we've expanded to a lot more schools in the area. And we hope to do more, too. But it's this second grade field trip where the kids come and they have an 1896 school day for a few hours. So they do reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's, just like kids would have done in 1896. They follow the same rules. But it's amazing to see how the kids love this. They really, they love getting assigned the name of a student who actually went to Central School.
Oh, that's nice.
I've seen some kids, they'll come in the spring for their second grade field trip, and then they'll come back for history camp, and they remember exactly who they were. So it's a great way to connect kids with history, especially their own local history. It's the kind of thing where I look back, I'm like, man, I wish we had this when I was a kid growing up here. Because this would have made, little Emily so happy. But yeah, so field trips are a big one. But we also do public programs too in there. So if anyone's ever attended one of our afternoon teas, we host those in there. Every second Sunday of the month, we do an open house. It's called our Second Sundays at the Society program. So we were able to open the doors there, and it's our way of sort of giving back to the community.
Okay, yeah. So it's pretty special to have a one-room schoolhouse. How rare are they in Illinois now?
I'm not certain how rare, but you don't come across them very often. I mean, I could think of a few, but it's still like maybe a couple in a county, depending on how big the county is. Yeah. It's not much.
Okay.
So it's definitely a rare piece of Mount Prospect history, right, let alone like rural Illinois history.
Okay. So the main part of the museum is the
Dietrich Friedrich House.
Friedrich's house, yes. Tell me a little bit about that.
So that one is original to the site. That house was not moved. It's been there since it was built in 1906. And we call it the Dietrich Friedrichs house because the family that was actually in there the longest was Dietrich and Lena Friedrichs. And they're actually the couple who built the house. So they were married in 1904, built the house and moved out to Mount Prospect in 1906. And then a few years later, they had their daughter, Bessie. They lived there. There was a Friedrichs family member living in there from 1906 to 1966.
Okay.
And we're lucky that Bessie was still alive when we were restoring the house, so she was able to tell us, like, how her family lived in the house, what each room was used for. So today, visitors, when they come in, they see the house. It's set for the year 1917 because that's when Mount Prospect was incorporated.
Right.
So it's not too far off from 1906. So it's a mix of things in there that are just from the time period. So from that early 1900s to sort of show you what it was like to visit a house like that. Nothing especially fancy. Like, this is a rural Mount Prospect at the time. But it's also telling you about a specific family that lived there because, again, thanks to Bessie in large part, we do have items from her family. So, like, we have Dietrich's violin. He was a very musical guy. We've got his violin, some harmonicas, and he used to play for gigs around town. So him and his buddy, if there was a dance in town, they'd be there. So that sort of thing.
Oh, very nice. And you're open for tours?
Yes. We're open every Wednesday from 10 to 2 for tours. And then that second Sunday program, we're open 11:30 to 1:30 for tours.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about some of the other programs that the Society puts on.
We've got a variety. We're doing a $5 series. So I want to call it a lecture series, but that doesn't sound very exciting.
No.
It's like, so speakers come in and they talk about things that history related, but something that they have some sort of expertise in. So Ann Shaughnessy at the Mount Prospect Public Library, she was speaking about genealogy back in April. In September, our board president, Frank Corey, is going to talk about ham radio and the Zenith Towers, that station WJAZ, which that one should be cool. So stuff like that sort of a general, just sort of a general interest thing.
Can you explain the name a little bit?
Oh, the WJAZ.
No, the $5 five.
Oh yeah, it's so they're held every fifth Saturday of every month that has a fifth Saturday in it. So that's where one of the fives, and then we ask a $5 admission charge. So that's where the $5 five comes in.
Okay.
So that's one of the programs. I think I already mentioned the afternoon teas. We've got one coming up in November. That one's about the 1920s. That should be cool. And we have a bunch of youth programming too. So this is, right now we're coming right off of the summer youth programming. There's 2 sessions of history camp, which again, this is one of those things that I wish we had this when I was a kid. It's all local history focused. And then we've got some other shorter like youth programs. One this year was about the gold rush. So that was a hit. I walked in on that one.
Yeah.
Everyone was having a lot of fun.
Yes, they got to pan for gold a
Yes,
little bit.
they panned for gold. They were searching for gold. It was fun.
Okay. So Mount Prospect, it's a suburb of Chicago, and Chicago has a lot of the history. But why is it important for a town the size of Mount Prospect to have a historical society?
Oh, because your historical society, a town's history, that's your roots. You need to know where you came from. You need to understand how you got here, and that better helps you understand the present. And the historical society, it's a good way to share that. It's a good resource, to share those resources, really.
Okay. So I understand you recently took some time to write a book.
Yes, I did.
I've got the book right here. And Mount Prospect Historic Sites. Tell us a little bit about what's in the book and how did you decide to write it and why people would be interested in reading it.
All right. Well, so I guess starting from the beginning, So literally within my first month starting here, I started in July 2020. So with COVID, things were very uncertain. But so my first weeks, I was chatting with the now former board president, Deb Riddle, and she was saying, like, you know what? I think we need a sequel to Lost Mount Prospect. And that was a book written by former director Gavin Cleeseby's back in, I want to say, like 15 years ago or so now.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Just because, unfortunately, in Mount Prospect, a lot of historic buildings have been demolished. And even with a lot of construction paused in 2020, it was still like, we see this, plans are forming. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a good point. But the publisher, Arcadia, they don't do sequels for that series. So I'm like, all right, back to the drawing board. And so I chatted with family and friends and just sort of like let the ideas steep. But then I realized, I'm like, you know what? I hear a lot that Mount Prospect has no history, which honestly, that's disheartening. I'm the director of a historical society and you're telling me there's no history in town? Then what am I doing? So essentially, after sitting with that, I decided, I'm like, you know what? We do have history here. So that's what I wanted my book to be about. Not focusing on what we've lost so much as what we still have, even if it's difficult to see or not as obvious as, some historic building like Central School, where that is generally acknowledged as a historic building. And that's ultimately became the point of my book, is we do have history here. Here's all the ways it's still here. And I know for a lot of people, it brings back good memories to seeing these photos of the buildings back when they were new.
Can you give me an example of a good site in town that? Yes.
Yes. Well, actually, the cover photo, it looks like a bar, and technically it is, but that's the bar at the VFW Hall, which today that's the Moose Lodge on Main Street. So that was one of my most surprising things to learn. One of my early years here at the Historical Society, we received a donation of a man named Dick Halbrin's photo album. He was a drill team member at the VFW, and his album is full of photos of the VFW Hall when it was, basically it was a party central in Mount Prospect in the 50s and 60s. So it was cool to not just read that, but then see the photos. So that's where that's where the cover photo came from, a 1958 party. And I just love it because it's one of those things where the building itself, the veterans built that in 49 through 50, and they built it to blend in with the area. So it looks like this unassuming ranch house, really.
Yes.
So you'd never guess, like, there's fun stuff happening in there, even today. So just, right. It's such a contradiction until you really learn about it and you realize, oh no, this was a huge community gathering space, especially in the 50s and 60s. Where we have all these photos to show that.
Well, that's very cool that you have that, yes. All right. Well, yeah, I know so much of Mount Prospect has been torn down, and not enough of it has been preserved. My early days here, the building that now houses Capanary's Ice Cream was moved from the corner of Northwest Highway and 83. And that building was in terrible shape, but it was the original general store, right?
Yes.
And now Mayor Hofert was a big proponent of saving that building, and people thought at the time, oh, this building's a wreck.
Yes. But now look, and that's one of those things of, this is one of the success stories of Mount Prospect of, this is what I mean. When we do still have history in town, I've talked to people who don't realize the Capanary's building is so old. I'm like, well, really, it is. Like, trust me, I got pictures.
It was the first commercial structure.
It was, and it's still the oldest.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of old structures, you at the Historical Society recreated a blacksmith shop.
Yes.
Yeah, in what was a coach house.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that exhibit, it was done by the director before me, Lindsay. And that pretty much is, it's an exhibit on the town's first blacksmith, John Mine. So how we got him was actually a pretty fun story. The guy who ran the general store, John Conrad Maylane, he realized Prospect needed a blacksmith. Blacksmiths back in the day, in the late 1800s, they were the hardware store. You needed one in order to make a viable community. So he heard about this guy, John Mine, and he caught him on the train one day, talked to him, because he was actually apprenticing with a blacksmith in Arlington Heights. So he convinced him to set up his own shop here in Mount Prospect. And it's a good thing he did because, again, he had a lot of work. He was also a farrier, so he was shoeing horses, which for a farming community in the 1800s and early 1900s, you need that. So this is our way to sort of tell his story about his life and talk about blacksmiths, because that's not one that you don't see a blacksmith on every corner anymore. So it's a way to learn about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have a local guy who comes out and does blacksmith.
Yes, or rather, our regular local guy, he retired.
Oh, did he?
Because it's a very strenuous job. It works out muscles you didn't know you have. Because I did take a few blacksmithing lessons while I was at Neighbor Settlement.
Okay.
So I know it's a lot of work, but we're working on restarting that. Blacksmiths are kind of hard to find here.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah. So stay tuned.
All right. Yeah. Because we need to keep that history alive.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how do you think Mount Prospect? I know a lot of people who move here, they like the small town feel that Mount Prospect has. You know, we're a pretty major community, a suburb surrounding a major metropolitan area. But how do you think we maintain our small town feel here, in your opinion?
Honestly, I'm not sure, because I felt it too. It's so weird, and I tell I've gotten comments from people of well, what makes you guys different from your neighbors? I'm like, aren't all suburbs? They're telling me aren't all suburbs the same? I'm like, no, but also again, we do manage to maintain that small town feel. I'm not really sure how. I think in general, we seem to have a very strong community. There seems to be a very strong just sense of who we are as Mount Prospect, and that sort of thing. There seems to be a strong identity, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. And we see it at the Historical Society. I see it at community events. Again, we've got a lot of enthusiasm here, which is good.
Okay. So, segueing into that, tell me a little bit about the Historical Society itself. What does it do? How do you become a part of it?
Oh, yeah. Well, so essentially our mission is to preserve and then share local history. And we do that through a lot of different ways, whether it's through our programs, which I already talked about a bunch, the actual house museum, Central School, having these historic sites open to the public so they can learn. But we also do it through our social media. We're always posting local history things. Actually, in the past year, I've been working on a video series, Hometown History,
Right.
which that actually contributed to my second chapter of the book, looking for all those hidden history sites. And so in that way, but we also preserve it too. So we do have an artifact collection with around 7,000 artifacts.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. So they all speak to Mount Prospect history, and they can all, as I'm sure my board has heard, I want to see, what stories about Mount Prospect can this object tell? So that's part of the preserving. We also have a ton of documents and photos that just, again, they all get pieced together to help tell us even the bits and pieces about Mount Prospect's history, whether it's people or businesses or events or something like that. And then sharing it, again, it's in a lot of different ways.
Okay, and if you want to become more involved, can you have a board?
Yeah, we have a board of directors. They're essentially the governance of the Historical Society, like a lot of museums and historical societies. So that's one option. We also have membership opportunities.
Okay.
So you can become a member. There's varying levels too, so go to our website to look up more about that. And then if you want to take a more active role, like a very hands-on, shall I say, you could become a volunteer too. So I know we always need help, whether it's even just sort of office-related tasks, helping manage the collection, so cataloging artifacts, caring for the artifacts, and stuff like that.
And how do they get in touch with you?
Also, we have a volunteer application form on our website.
Okay.
And that's just, it sounds very formal with an application process, but really it's just so you could tell me what you're interested in. Because I want to give volunteers things that they're interested in and things that they're good at and enjoy doing. So yeah, it helps.
Well, we'll put the website up with the podcast information, but can you tell us real quick what it is?
Yeah. So our website is www.mtphist.org. So MountPHist.org.
Okay, very good. No, okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to back up. You're a non-for-profit organization. You have various fundraisers, and you rely on donations. But your biggest fundraiser happens in December, and that's the holiday house walk. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's been running for over 30 years. I think we may be going on year 35. So it's a long-standing local tradition. And essentially, for those who aren't familiar with this, every year the Historical Society's House Walk Committee picks a neighborhood in Mount Prospect. They ask some historic houses in the neighborhood, and those houses are open for tours during the house walk. So you get to go take a look at these amazing historic houses, and some are more new renovations too. So it's definitely a range. So if you don't like history, you could still find something to enjoy here. So you're able to go through these houses and see, the history in it, the renovations. It's an exciting thing. And like you said, it's our biggest fundraiser every year.
I know people love to see other people's houses indoors, especially to see what they've done. And you have them decorate for the holidays.
Yes, we ask them to decorate. So it's always, very festive vibe going on. And there's luminarias too to line the path. So it's everywhere. The whole neighborhood is glowing inside and out.
Yes, and you get approximately how many people?
Ooh, oh wait, houses or like guests?
Guests. How many people?
I would go with over 500.
Right.
It's a lot. And I know just from talking to people, it's not just people in Mount Prospect, it's people from other neighboring suburbs too.
Very nice.
Yeah, so it's a big deal here.
Okay. So kind of wrapping up, what would you like your kind of biggest achievement to be here?
Wow, that's a good question. Can I say more than one or?
Sure.
All right. So one project I've been working on is just working on the artifact collection. Just making sure that is, doing the best we can to take care of things, because it's 7,000 objects is a lot to manage.
Right.
So
where do you keep them all?
Well, that's a good question. We have a couple basement storage areas. And actually for the March 2nd Sunday program, that's where we open the doors, because one of those sites is underneath Central School. So we open the doors there, and I'll be there to give tours and answer questions.
Well, that's very exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I'd like to make sure the collection is in a space where it's not just like protected, but also in places that we can share that. So we're taking more photos of artifacts. We're doing more research on the artifacts and stuff like that, so we can, find those hidden gems in the collection that maybe we've all kind of overlooked for years. And hey, no, this is an important piece of Mount Prospect history. But then at the same time, I'd like to make sure that Mount Prospect is really getting out there in the community, whether that be going to events or, hosting our own events. I want to make sure, I want to strengthen our ties with the community, because, that's an important part. We're telling the community's story, so the community should be part of that.
Okay, very good. Well, I want to thank you for coming and talking with us. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk about these things.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I enjoy this.
And thank you for tuning in to MountPodcast. MountPodcast can be found wherever podcasts are downloaded. You can also go to the village website at www.mountprospect.org. So this is Howard Kleinstein signing off. See you on the next podcast.